This handsome looking fella is a Toyota Corolla Cross, an all-new subcompact crossover for 2022 that slots below the popular RAV4 SUV. And today we're going to see whether or not it's worth your cash. Despite being called Corolla Cross, there's very little visually that ties this into the Corolla until you start looking quite closely. Though, regardless, it's still a handsome looking thing. It has quite grown-up styling for a compact SUV, not unlike the Volkswagen Taos I reviewed recently on this channel. Take a look around. While the exterior might not scream Corolla at you, the interior is really where things begin to change, because this dashboard may as well have been lifted directly out of the current Corolla. Though that's not necessarily a hardship. I think things in general here are pretty decent. There's a little bit of squish here in the dash, so up here certainly is a lot of hard, cheap, scratchy plastic. Ugh. Beyond that, the hardware at play here is decent. This is a mid-level LE trim. This is a pretty representative vehicle of what you'd actually go and buy with your own cash. We have features like Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and thanks to an optional $2,400 standalone package upgrade, in this case we have the larger 8-inch screen, a 7-inch display, the same design as standard, along with JBL audio and wireless phone charging down here. However, despite the 28 grand asking price, we are missing quite a lot of stuff in here in my opinion. And you can tell because there's a lot of blanked off areas down here where things and features should be that you might get on the XLE, for example, the top trim, that you don't get in this vehicle. Things like dual zone climate control and heated front seats, for example, are notably missing. And that's because those features are of course reserved for the top trim level, which is a clear push to get you to buy the more expensive one. If you're watching this, you might not be concerned about the quality of the interior materials. You may be, however, concerned with the spaciousness of the interior. And I'm happy to report it is, well, quite spacious, because I fit here, 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 and here as well. And that's because, as you might expect, going from a sedan to a crossover, rear seat room is notably increased in Corolla Cross. I'm 6'1", I have tons of headroom thanks to this cutout space in the headliner, a good amount of knee room as well. It's very comfy back here. Oh yeah, and the trunk is literally twice as large as what you'd find on a Corolla sedan. You shouldn't be surprised when I tell you that driving the Corolla Cross feels exactly like driving, well, a Toyota Corolla. And that's because, well, it may be a bit higher riding and a teeny bit wider, a bit bigger inside. It's a bit shorter, so overall, in terms of the way this thing drives, the way this thing feels, it just feels like you're driving a Corolla around town. Nimble, navigable, things like that. Also, the powertrain is identical to what you'd find in, say, a Corolla SE, for example. Under the hood is a 2-liter 4-cylinder, good for 169 horse and 151 pound-feet of torque, which in this case sends power to the front wheels via a continuously variable automatic transmission. Not super fun stuff per se, but the efficacy cannot be denied, because this front-wheel drive model, all-wheel drive is available for an extra grand, returns EPA fuel economy figures of 31 mpg city, 33 mpg freeway, and 32 mpg combined. Though, dear viewer, I'm happy to tell you that, like a lot of Toyota vehicles these days, the Corolla Cross managed to actually smash those numbers in the real world. I live in LA, I drive around LA, I mention this in every video. It is awful to drive around here. So for the longest time, the indicated average fuel economy gauge was hovering around 29 or so, which is to be expected. However, my wife and I took a long weekend road trip down to San Diego, LA to SD. Some traffic along the way, the typical, but a lot of open road driving. And this thing absolutely smashed it, because the MPG gauge was just soaring the whole way there and back. And by the time we got back to LA, the average indicated fuel economy was hovering around 37 miles per gallon. Absolutely huge. And I verified those numbers when I went to refuel the Corolla Cross, because the first tank of fuel returned a real-world MPG number of 37.2 MPG thanks to that road trip. Very, very impressive. However, I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you why. The reason why I'm not surprised by those stellar fuel economy figures is because, of course, well, this same powertrain in a Corolla sedan will crack 40 mpg on the freeway. And sure, this thing is a little bit bigger and a little bit heavier and higher riding, but once you get cars kind of up and going and just cruising down the open road, the powertrains don't have to work all that hard to kind of keep them going. So I'm not surprised that Corolla Cross in the real world have managed to close the gap considerably with the smaller Corolla sedan. The trade-off here with that stellar fuel economy is a rather, well, meager engine. It sounds quite grainy, especially on startup. It sounds kind of rough and diesely. And then really as you drive along, you really hear it kind of go, ugh. Not really a nice noise. Though for the most part, the automatic transmission keeps the engine RPMs low enough that you won't really notice it too much. That slightly agricultural sounding engine does not encourage you to push or drive this thing hard, which is good because Corolla Cross has a very relaxed driving personality about it overall. Similar to the Volkswagen Taos I recently reviewed on this channel, this front-wheel drive Corolla Cross employs independent suspension up front and a simple beam axle rear suspension out back. It's not going to fall over in the corners or anything, but it's not really a real dynamo out here on a winding road, as it were. Though I suspect approximately 0.0% of people who buy a Corolla Cross really care about limit handling. Instead, where this thing shines is the fact it's soft and comfortable and for the most part pretty quiet. The ride on these 17-inch wheels seemed completely unperturbed by the rough roads around downtown San Diego or the rough roads in LA, to be frank. And that's definitely a good thing because, again, for the target audience, people who are actually going to buy this, they don't care about sporty handling. They want something that's quiet, comfortable, and fuel efficient. And in those regards, Corolla Cross is doing pretty well right now. One facet of that ride and road comfort is wind noise, a typical weak spot in the Toyota lineup for some reason. Fortunately, having got the Corolla Cross up over 80 miles per hour a few times on the course of our road trip, passing truckers and things like that, I'm happy to report that wind noise was decently mitigated for vehicles in this segment. If you look at Corolla Cross in the vacuum, just by itself, not comparing it against anything else, it seems like quite a solid little vehicle. However, the competition is fierce right now because as consumers continue to migrate towards crossovers and SUVs, car makers are going to keep making more and more and more of them. That's why you have a CHR that slots under this, then the RAV4, and so on and so forth. And every automaker is doing the same thing for that exact same reason, because you guys love to buy these things. And that means, of course, that there are a lot of vehicles I've driven on this channel to review for you guys, and a couple of them are really, really good. The most recent, of course, being the one I've referenced quite a few times in the video, the Volkswagen Taos. Slightly premium price point. I think the Corolla Cross is a better value play with standard features like Toyota Safety Sense, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, lane keep assist, rear guided cruise. That's an optional extra on the V-dubs. However, I will say Taos does make slightly better use of its space. It feels a little bit more spacious in the back seat, so if you're really tall, that might be the way to go. Then there are, in my opinion, great value plays like the Mazda CX-30, because more or less 30 grand worth of CX-30 gets you a punchier engine, sharper styling, and in my opinion, a slightly nicer interior. Though I will say I do slightly prefer the tech in the Toyota because while this infotainment may look a touch plain, the interface is so straightforward and easy to use, and once you have your phone paired up using CarPlay or Android Auto, and that takes over, it looks fantastic on this large screen. However, the fiercest competition of all for Corolla Cross, as far as I'm concerned, actually comes from within. Because while this is all new for 2022, in 2023, we're getting the Corolla Cross Hybrid. And if that is anything like the Corolla Hybrid I reviewed on this channel a few years ago, that's going to be absolutely fantastic. Because while Corolla Cross proved to be excellent in the MPG department, besting the EPA numbers is really impressive. The Corolla Hybrid I reviewed a few years ago destroyed the EPA fuel economy figures. I was touching over 60 miles per gallon in that thing, and that's amazing. If we can get anywhere near that in this thing, bring those MPG numbers up to the high 40s, maybe even the low 50s, that suddenly makes this thing the go-to. Because right now, when I recommend SUVs to just about anyone, my default is RAV4 Hybrid because it ticks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. But if you want a smaller form factor, and in this case, one that could probably beat those MPG numbers when the hybrid model comes out, that's going to be a really compelling package. So So the Corolla Cross does a lot of things right. However, like I mentioned, with such fierce competition, it is kind of hard to recommend this when I know that a hybridized version is coming right around the corner. And with Toyota being the king of hybridized vehicles, that's definitely going to be the one you want. So if you can hold off your shopping for just a few more months, while this is quite good, I think this Corolla Cross with a hybridized powertrain is going to be true class-leading stuff, and that's where I'd encourage you to spend your money. So in the meantime, everyone, my name is Jake. You've been watching Drive, Brake, Fix, Repeat, and I'll see you guys next time where I go do more fun things with cars. Bye.